In this video, you will learn how to use Self-Manager to prepare files for claiming participants' funds from the NDIS portal. First, I will show you how to enter payment records into Self-Manager with file attachments, selecting the correct support categories, suppliers, and NDIS-specific line items. Then we will export the file with all of this information in it in a format that is accepted by the NDIS provider portal. Normally, you would have the NDIS portal and the Self-Manager Files page open on one of your monitors, while you work through the payment and claims processes on the second monitor. We are only working on one screen in this training session, so there will be a bit of flicking through windows while we work our way through. I will start by going back to the dashboard page so I can access the payments page. We select Add a Payment from the Payments drop-down menu here to add the payment record for the invoice we looked at a moment ago. Then I will select the participant or the manager as they are called here on Self-Manager. There are quite a few on my list here, so I will start to type the name to make it quicker to find the right manager. Next, we need to confirm which plan this invoice should be paid from. You can see the current plan is selected by default. If we have managed previous plans for the participant, you will have a drop-down menu available here that you can select from. If a payment comes out of an old plan, make sure you check that service booking on the portal to make sure funds are still available to make a payment. After you have selected the plan, you can view the plan by clicking on this button. You can use this if you want to access the shortcuts to the service bookings on the NDIS portal that we set up in the previous video. In this instance, we already have the service bookings page open for this plan in the background. Then we add a payment description for this invoice. I will refer back to the invoice to get some of the details we need. I will open the Files page in a different tab so I can look at the invoice. Then select the file from the list to open the preview. Enter the supplier's name, the invoice number, how it was received, and your initials in this field. This makes it easy to see who entered the invoice later on. As I mentioned earlier, participants sometimes log in and enter payments themselves, so by adding my initials, we know that I was the one who made this entry and how I received the invoice. In the payment date, you select the invoice date or the service date if there is only one date listed on the invoice. If the invoice date is after the end of the plan date, make sure you use the last service date listed on the invoice as the payment date, otherwise the budget will not pick up the payment. The budgets on Self-Manager pick up the payment dates as there are no options to select service dates at this stage. Then on this side, you will add the allocations for the invoice. This is where you specify which support categories the invoice should be paid from. On the front end of Self-Manager, these categories are called line items. If you have selected a unit of measurement for any of the line items when you set them up, you will see a field here where you add the units. Usually we do not track units at this stage in the process, and you only need to add the total amount payable for each category. Some invoices include services for more than one category, and you can repeat this process and click on Add an Allocation again to add another line with a different category. The total invoice amount will be added up for you. Next, we select the supplier from this list. This list is plan specific, and you saw how we added suppliers to a plan in the My Plans training session. If the supplier you are looking for is not on this list, you can leave this area as is for now, then add these details later on when you start to process the claims. The reference or invoice number must be entered exactly as it is on the invoice, including any numbers, letters, spaces, and special characters. This is to ensure that an invoice is not processed for payment more than once. Self-Manager will warn you if the same invoice number has been used for the same supplier before, and if this happens, you need to look back at the payments you have made in the past and notify the supplier of the issue. If you can't find a record of the invoice, it may be that the number was accidentally entered by one of the other plan managers, in which case you need to seek advice from your manager. In this Attachments area, you browse the files that you uploaded in the Files area and attach the invoice and any other supporting documents with this payment. Only the files that have been marked Approved on the Files page will come up in this browser window. This is where it's handy to name the files consistently so that you can find them easily in this browser window. They are listed alphabetically. I will scroll down my list here until I find the correct file for this payment. If there's a note against a file, you can view this by clicking on the pencil. You can preview the invoice by clicking on this eye here. Select the file you want to attach, then click on the Add Files button. If there's more than one file for a payment, for instance a therapist's report, you just repeat the process by opening the file browser again and selecting and attaching the additional document. You can preview the file at this stage to make sure that you selected the correct one. Just select this button next to the file you have uploaded. This will open the file in a new tab, and you can drag this tab across to your other monitor to check that the information in the invoice matches what you have entered in the payment section. If you have selected the wrong file attachment, simply delete it by clicking on this red cross. Then repeat the process to upload the correct attachment. When you have checked that all the information on this page is correct, select Make and Claim Payment to progress to the Claims facility, which is where you start to build your export file in preparation for claiming funds from the NDIS portal. In the Claims facility, you see a list of payments that are due to be claimed from the portal. These payments have either been entered by you or by the participant themselves, but you will also see entries for our fees here, which have been generated automatically. We will cover the fees in a separate session. Some of the payments may have issues with them, which is why they are still sitting in the Claims facility. I will show you an example of this shortly. After you have processed the batch of invoices you received via email, review the Claims facility for any entries that have been made by your participants or their nominees. The entries are listed chronologically, with the newest entries on top, so it's easy to check for any new entries each morning. You won't need to go through the process of uploading the files and adding payment records for entries made by your participants, as they have already been added for you. You will simply process them in the Claims facility, which I will show you how to do now. As we have just added a record to the claims list from the Payments page, this record is already selected for us. You can see a preview of the invoice on the right-hand side of this page. You use this as a guide to make the appropriate selections for the claim. Across the top here, you can see the total invoice amount, how much we have claimed, and the balance of the claim. At the moment, the balance is negative, as we have not started to process this claim yet. You can also see the plan reference number on the top of this page and a shortcut to the My Plans area. To start processing the claim, we need to make some selections in the Claim Amounts tab here. Click on this button to select the line items that we are going to claim from. We need to first select the support category before we get a list of the line items to choose from. These are the line items we added when we set up My Plans in a previous session. I will select Improved Daily Living Skills, as this is the category for most therapy supports, including psychology. You can see that there's only one line item set up for this category. If you need to add more lines, just go back to the My Plans area and add the line item by selecting it from the list available in the Support section. This line item is the one I need. You can see that it says Psychology on the invoice and in this description, so I will select this one. Then I will click on this button to save my line item selection. You can see that the line we just selected has come up as a heading. You can go back and add more categories and lines at this stage by clicking Select Line Items again. Now we can add the claim amount for this category. First, you need to select the date range for the services listed in the invoice. You can see that the date of service is the 8th of April on this invoice, so we select this date in both of the calendars. When there are multiple dates of service in an invoice, you select the range. In this units field, we specify the quantity of units delivered, in this case 1 hour, and the rate is $210. This is below the capped rate in the NDIS price guide, so we will be able to claim this without any problems. The maximum rate for a line is showing in this rate field, and you can adjust it to match the rate on the invoice. You can see that the unclaimed amount on top of the page here changed to 0 as soon as I entered the total amount. In this next tab, you can review the supplier and invoice number details. If you did not select a supplier when you first entered the payment, or if the participant entered the payment themselves, you add the supplier details on this page. You will see the full drop-down list of all the suppliers saved on Self Manager on this page, not just the ones you selected specifically for the participant in the My Plans section. As mentioned earlier, make sure you enter the invoice number exactly as it is on the invoice to avoid any duplications. If the invoice you entered only has a BPay payment option, it is important to add the customer reference number in this section. Self Manager can pick up the reference number from the invoice most of the time, but sometimes you need to enter the number manually if the image quality is poor. In this example, the invoice has an EFT payment option, and these supplier details are good to go. We select this reasonable and necessary tick box to confirm that the payment meets NDIS criteria and the goals in the participant's plan. If you have received special instructions from a planner or therapist in relation to a payment, you can add comments in this field here. This will assist in the case of an audit where we will be able to quickly substantiate why we processed a payment. It's a good idea to add any supporting documentation as a file attachment with the payment entry in these circumstances to make sure you have a full audit trail. This claim is pretty straightforward, so I will go ahead and save this. I'll repeat this workflow one more time to give you a refresher of the process. It can be a bit overwhelming at first, so make sure you pause the video and take notes if you need to. First, I go back to the dashboard page, then add a payment. In the Files section, I find the next invoice I'm going to process. Then on the payment page, I select the manager from this drop-down list and check the invoice to make sure the services are within the plan dates. Now I check the service booking on the portal for this participant. And confirm the plan the payment is coming from. In the description, I add the supplier name, invoice number, delivery method, and my initials. Then select the invoice date or service date from the calendar here. On this side, I add the category or line item allocations and total amount, and select the supplier from this list. Then copy the invoice number from the invoice and paste it into this field to make sure it's exactly the same. Now browse the files to attach with the payment record. Then make and claim payment. In the claims facility, I will start with the claim amounts here and select the line items from the menu here. Then I select the date range for the services delivered. And the unit quantity. I can see that we have a problem here. The unit price on the invoice exceeds the capped rate in the NDIS price guide. I can enter a higher amount here, but you can see that this field turns red. This means that if we try to claim this amount, the NDIS portal will not pay it in full, but cap it at the rate listed in the price guide. As you can understand, this can get pretty messy, so I will skip this invoice for now and troubleshoot it later on. As I mentioned earlier in this session, you may have a few of these problematic payments in your claims facility, and you revisit these in the afternoon after you have completed your uploads at lunchtime. I will make a note about this issue here in the notes section so that I can come back to it. I will save the changes by clicking this Save Claim button. I will also quickly add the problematic invoice to the File section, as this disappears off the list as soon as it has been attached to a payment. I will add a note about the capped rate here too. I'll quickly add one more payment record before I go to the next step, so that we have a couple of records to work with in our claim file. I add 0.75 as a unit here, as the appointment was 45 minutes long. Then I work out what the hourly rate is based on this. In this session, you learnt how to add payment entries and building claims in Self Manager in preparation for uploading a claim to the NDIS portal. You saw how important it is to check all the payment details in order for the claim to be successfully paid after we upload the export file to the NDIS portal. In the next session, we will explore the NDIS claim export page, upload a claim to the NDIS portal, then reconcile the claim back inside Self Manager in preparation for supplier payments.